And we're going to be looking at this next example. So our next example is example 1.2. It's found on page 7 in your book, towards the bottom of the page. And what it wants us to do here in this problem, it wants us to create the kinematic diagram for this vice grips. Okay, so vice grips is probably pretty familiar to most of us and how it's being used, but it also is an element where when we start looking at, especially step number 1 here, as we go through this process, where is the frame? Okay, because in this case, it's not like we're bolting a vice grips to anything. And you might, think of it in terms of, well, everything is movable. But what we end up doing in cases like this, when we're looking at, for instance, hand tools, we pick one of the elements and we just kind of hang on to it. Okay, and we say, this one's not going to move, and we're going to move everything else relative to it. So in this case, for the vice grips, I'm going to kind of peek ahead. You're going to notice that they chose this top portion to be the frame. So it's kind of like we're holding on to that, and then the rest of it is going to kind of dangle down below and do what it needs to do. So if we go to the top of page 8 in our book, looks nothing like a vice grips, right? But let's analyze and see how they came up with what they did. And then I want you just to do a practice like we did before, creating this in AutoCAD. So as we flip back over here, the first step is to determine what the frame is of our vice grips. Okay, so first and foremost, if we don't have an obvious frame where something is bolting to or is being stationary, then we identify it as the designer. And in this case, they chose that top portion to be the frame, that's just going to sit where it's at. So then we look how many elements or which elements are attached to the frame. So you'll notice that if we look at this frame member, I'm going to zoom in so we can see it larger here, and I'll focus. That means that our connections are at this point and at this point. Okay, so as we look to the next page and we look underneath and at that diagram, that's exactly where we see point D and point A. All right, those are that handle. They didn't draw the full handle here, but those 2 points are considered the frame. They're not moving. Okay, and even though they're continuous, we wouldn't show them connected at all. Okay, so that's how we identify the frame. Now, in this case, you'll notice that they put the, if you would, I'll call it the anchor down below. I would probably personally draw this so that this anchor was actually on the top. Either way, though, is legal. Okay, the orientation of the frame isn't necessarily all that important. Okay, but sometimes you kind of put it where it's obvious. So those 2 points are going to be the frame points. And then you're going to simply draw a connector down here to what would be that bottom portion of the handle. Then we have this piece right here. So this is going to be another simple link with 2 connections, and then probably a special interest point out here. And then finally, we're going to have the bottom jaw here where we're going to connect here, but then we're going to have a special interest point going out to that point and then in, so that we can see where that's going to end. Okay, so if we go back to our diagram, you'll notice that that's that bottom portion of the jaw. This is the bottom handle, and then that's that connecting link right here. So what I want you to do now is just, let's do a practice and represent this in AutoCAD using that same formatting that we just looked at with our previous example. Now, in this case, we don't have a slider, but we do have 2 frame members. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up AutoCAD, and I'm really just going to practice duplicating that very same diagram that we see here. Now, I'm going to start a new file. So I'm going to go up to File, New, and it's simply going to open up a new place here. Now, if you don't have a template, I happen to, that's okay. You can just hit OK and go in. And you can just use the regular ACAD one, because now when we pull in our blocks from before, they're going to have the same things that we had identified earlier. So the first thing we're going to pull in is going to be that frame member. So I'm going to do an insert, blocks from library, and I'm going to grab. Now, this frame should be available to you because it's the same session of AutoCAD, but if not, you would go down and you would browse to the block library where you have it saved. Okay, but we happen to have it here. And remember, this is a click, not a click and drag. Double check that you have uniform scale down here. Okay, so that you're going to use the same scale for both the X direction and the Y direction. That's why it's there. It asks one less question. So I'm going to left click, and then I'm just going to place this and left click it again. And I'm just going to hit enter for the scale factor. Down in your command line, 1 is the default. So it'll come in this size, which is totally fine. Now, again, if you wanted to, you could rotate this around. I'm going to, because I feel like it should be on top and everything else is dangling down below, so that this isn't interfering. So all I'm going to do is I am going to do a rotate of this item, enter. I'm going to grab that center as my base position, and then I'm going to hit 180 degrees. Okay. And that's going to be my first frame member. So again, I'm kind of putting it upside down to what the book is doing, just so it's not interfering with the other stuff down below. Okay. And then I'm going to do a copy because I need 2 frame members. I'm going to do a copy, which is right down below the move. I'm going to select, enter my base position here. And it looks like they're about the same position. So if you wanted to do ortho for this, you could. And I'll put it right about there. Okay, and that's it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my other members. So I'm going to go and make sure that I'm on my object layer. So by pulling in that frame member, you should at least have your object and your X hatch. Do you guys have that as layers? So you should be able to go on that object line layer. And then you're going to grab the center. And you're just going to, again, proportionally bring this down to about here, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a triangle that's going to go something like this. See, I think I've got to go get my ortho off again. I don't want that snap on. Get rid of this. There we go. I don't want that snap. Oops. Clicked inadvertently. So line, I want to go up just a little bit, and then get that Y point and down there. Okay. And then I'm going to add my last line, or my triangle-ish for my jaw. Crazy how that looks. I'm going to bring this over to about here. Bring this up there. There we go. More down, like directly down below. It looks like it's kind of vertical. And then it looks like it's in line here. So I'm going to try to activate back on my point. Activate this, and go back to the center. So again, just using what they have there. Once you have your links in place, we now can add our joints, okay? And that's going to be grabbing them because we have a joint right here, grabbing it from here, but you'll notice that because I pulled it in as a block, it's all one member. Do you remember what I need to do to like break it apart? I need to do explode, right? So I'm going to go up underneath my erase, and I'm going to click that explode command. I'm going to click on the frame, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay. And now that one's open. Now the other one's not, and you can leave the other one, you know, as a block, but all I want is I want that joint. So I'm going to do a copy, and I'm going to select both the outside circle and the hatch, enter. And I'm going to go to the center as my base position. Then I'm going to go to the end point for what would be points C and B. Don't put a joint out by the special interest point of Y because it's just that. It's not a joint. It's just a point at the end of the handle. It's not connecting anything. We just want these where we have like relative motion about that joint from one link to another. Okay. How's it going for everybody? All right. Now we haven't saved this. So this was called a vice grips. right? So we can do File, Save As. I always like to save at a point where I don't want to redo what I just did. Okay. If it's something easy and I just drew a rectangle, no big deal. But if I get further along, I'm like, yeah, I really don't want to do all that again. Then I definitely save. So I'm going to call this Vice Grips. And then save. And then I'm just going to add my labels. So I need to add my numbers for each one of my links and the letters for each one of the joints. And we'll use the system that they used in our book. Okay. So if I go up underneath here, all right, looks like we've got number 1 by one of the frame members. We don't need to add it to both of them because the frame is the frame and the symbol identifies that it's a frame, but we need to identify one of them as number 1. And then they have number 2 as the handle, number 3 as the jaw, and number 4 as that connecting rod. So we'll put those in first. And remember, our numbers of our links always have the circles around them, okay? So I'm going to go on to, if you don't have it, you want to grab and you want to create a notes layer. I have my notes as magenta and then the line weight of default. So if you want to add that, go right ahead and do that. And then when I add my labels here, I'm going to put them on my notes layer. So really 3 main layers here: object line, hatch, and notes. So I'm going to start with text. You could do single line to single line because they really are single. Probably maybe the easier thing to do. Then we can hit enter when we're done. I am simply going to make a text box. My height is going to be 0.2, which is enter. And then now I've got the number 1. Why is it so big on this one? And I hit click outside. Oh, I think I had to hit escape. So that's number 1. It's kind of big. I went from one extreme to the next, so I can scale this down. I'm going to scale this from its original size, enter, and I'm going to put it right about there. I think that's a good size. Again, proportional so that when I do a screen snip, I'm going to be able to see it. And then now I'm going to add my circle around on the notes layer so that they're the same color. Maybe that's even a little bit big yet. So I'm going to scale it one more time, selecting both the number and the circle, and I'll go like right about there. I think that looks good proportionally. So then I'm going to move this to the position of one of the frames. Again, we're not going to do both of them. It would be redundant because the symbol identifies the other one as the frame. And then I'm simply going to do a copy of this number 1 with its circle, base position. Looks like I'm going to have a 3 here, a 2, I'm going to call this 2, and a 4. Okay. And I'm going to double click to change the text, 3, double click to change this one to 4. And double click to 2. And then before I'm completely done, I need to add my joint letters. So again, I can do a copy on just the number. For instance, number 1 here, enter, go from its position. And then I'm going to go close to each one of the joints. Okay. And then I'm going to change the letter, first one here to A. Remember, these are all caps. B, C, did I get it? C and D. And hit escape. And then I'll do one more save. On this. So again, the letters are the joints, no circles. The numbers are the links, including the frame always being number 1, and those have the circles around them. Any questions at all? So this is like 2 good practices for creating the kinematic diagrams. Okay. Now, if there aren't any questions, you're ready to start doing part of the assignment, the first part of the assignment, which is creating the kinematic diagrams for some end of the chapter problems. So why don't we look at those and kind of investigate, you know, how you would approach some of these. So I think using the examples that we have here and going over the AutoCAD, you are ready. So at the end of our chapter, which is going to be page 25, is where the problems start. So I'm gonna go back to Canvas for now. Now we still have a little bit to go over here in chapter 1. It's going to be some mobility things and a couple other elements that we'll finish up the next time we're together. But I want to get you drawing some diagrams here today since we've kind of are on a roll. So I'm going to go back and we're going to look at our assignment number 1. Okay. Assignment number 1 is going to be the kinematic diagrams for the end of the chapter questions that I have here. So you'll notice that number 1-1, 1-3, 1-9, 10, and 11, and 24. These are all kinematic diagrams, okay? So it looks like there's 6 kinematic diagrams that you're going to create, all right? In the very same fashion that we just did on these last 2 examples, but different problems, okay? And then we're going to be doing mobility calculations on those. And it's going to be the very same ones from above. So you're going to do what we call a mobility calculation or degrees of freedom for each one of the 6 that we drew the calculations for. So each one of those is only worth 5 points because it's not a full diagram. Okay. So if you would, it's kind of like half the number of problems here because they both go together. Each one has 2 parts. And then we have 2 case studies at the very end that you're just going to answer the questions at the end of the chapter. Dylan.
Mobility calculation, that's considered when you put the mobility on.
Don't even worry about it. No. Don't worry about mobility. No, we haven't done it yet. All I want to do is get you started on the kinematic diagrams. The next time we get together, we'll finish up mobility.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
sorry.
So the part that you can do now are going to be the kinematic diagrams for the problems at the end of the chapter, starting on page 25. Yep. So, so let's go underneath. I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. And our first problem is problem 1-1. And here we have a mechanism that's used to open the door of a heat treating furnace. And it's shown here in this picture. Okay. And what's going on here is you want to draw the kinematic diagram. And basically you've got a handle here. It rotates about that point. It's connected then to the door that can slide only up and down. So this is one of those slider mechanisms that we saw in the first example, but a little bit different orientation. Okay. So that's going to be similar to example 1-1. Okay. The next one that we have here is going to be a folding chair common to a stadium. And you're going to notice that it's up against the wall here. So if you would, these would be your frame members, and you are now going to have the seat that flips up and down, and you're going to draw the kinematic diagram for that. Okay. The next one that we have as we turn the page, we have number 9. This is a toggle clamp. Okay. We saw a similar diagram, not exactly the same, earlier in one of the diagrams in our PowerPoint. Then the next one that we have here is going to be a child's digging toy. You maybe have experienced this or seen these at a playground. Okay. And then we've got number 11, and the description is down there, but the diagram, it's a reciprocating saw at the top here of the next column. So you're going to draw the kinematic diagram of this section right here. This is going to be a crank with a slider going back and forth. All right. And then number 24 is at the bottom of page 28, okay, 24. And you're going to sketch the kinematic diagram of the sewing machine, not this one down here. You're going to go up to right here. Yeah, I know, it's kind of in a weird spot. So you're gonna do the sewing machine here, okay? So those are the first problems to draw the kinematic diagram for, and then we're gonna be looking at the mobility equations, okay? So that's what I wanted to get you started on today. So the rest of the time that we're together today, if you want to stick around and you want to work on getting this started, and then I'm here to answer questions, you can work independently or, you know, with a partner or, you know, with your neighbor. And then I'm here to kind of help you along. So I'm gonna stop recording.